You want to start? Marvellous. So I would like to introduce you to Ian Piper, who is our first presenter here, and he's the owner of Tellura Information Services Limited. He's a specialist in taxonomy design and semantic technologies, content architecture and modelling and knowledge organisations. And he's been working in this field for a number of years now. I personally have known you, Ian, for going on for nearly 10 years, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He is also a trusted party for Pool Party, who are a thesaurus and semantic web company. Without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Nikki. And hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about online card sorting for the development of taxonomies. I'm going to do a bit of jiggling with screens here. So I'm just going to start by sharing what will look like a blank screen for the moment. And I will put up just a small number of slides. Promise there's only a few here. So hopefully you can see now a grey slide entitled Building Taxonomies as Online Card Sorting Tools. If you can't, maybe you can indicate that. Otherwise, with that assumption, I'm going to crack on. I'm going to talk about, first of all, card sorting and taxonomies in a real world setting. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time with that because that's stuff that you probably know more about than I do. But then I'm going to get straight on to a demonstration of the online tool that I've developed. And questions, as Nico was saying, we're going to push those to the end of the session. So talking very briefly about card sorting. Card sorting for creating structured information systems is a very effective tool in that it allows people to share brain dumps, group and sort ideas. And when you do it in particular, I found to create taxonomies, it encourages ownership in the business. Because they've taken part and it's their ideas, they can see them made manifest. It's also a low-tech solution. You can do a card sort anywhere. But there are drawbacks as well. When you're doing a physical card sort, everyone has to be in the room. And that's difficult if you've got a distributed team. I worked with an organization last year that had people, 42 different people in around 30 different countries. Totally infeasible to do a card sort in a real world environment. And it's also difficult if you've got people who are busy on other things. Because it's real time, it's very difficult to work asynchronously, and it's very difficult to do follow-up or iterative development. Generally, you have to book a meeting room to run a card sort, and you can't just leave stuff there. You have to tidy up at the end of it, and it's difficult to pick that up again later. Finally, one of my biggest gripes is it makes more work for me because I have to do the post-mortem and transcribe all of those cards, which can be several hundred at times, into the taxonomy management system, which is tedious and it's prone to error. So after doing this for quite a few years, I started to think along the lines of these two questions. Is it possible that we can do this sort of thing online and have something that provides the benefits of card sorting, but also overcomes the clear limitations? And secondly, can we do this in such a way that non-taxonomists can take part? And the result of those questions was a tool that I developed, started it last year, finished it this year, called card sorting. It's called Pool Party Card Sorting now because after I demonstrated this at the Semantics conference in Karlsruhe last year, the semantic web company approached me and asked if they could buy the rights to it. And being a venal person as I am, and a mercenary money-grubbing consultant, I said, yes, of course. And so this is now a pool party tool. I have to say that they've taken the thing that I did, the basic product, and they've enhanced it considerably. So I've been really pleased with what they've managed to do with it. What it is an online equivalent to a real-world card sort. It provides an interactive workspace that's shared between a number of participants. And it provides tools for creating and handling cards. I'll show you this in just a moment. Crucially, it's aimed at business people, not taxonomists. Because my experience in trying to get general business people to build taxonomies directly in Pool Party, or any other tool for that matter, Workbench or any other such tool, it has been disappointing. As I'll show you shortly, the card sorting tool takes away the need for transcription because it allows you to put the cards that you create directly into Pool Party as concepts. Being a shared interactive space, it's distributed. Anyone with a computer can log in and share in the session. Everyone sees the same thing at the same time. And because the session, once it's established, is just left there until you archive it, it's asynchronous, so you can come back and do iterative development. So with that, I'm going to step out of the presentation and stop sharing my screen, if I can figure out how to do that. And then I'll start it again on another screen. So bear with me just one moment. Okay, I'm going to share desktop too. Right. So hopefully now you can see a web browser window that has a blue banner across the top. Again, do tell me or wave or something if you can't see that. Good. Interestingly, just as an aside, Zoom is unlike other systems that I've used in that when I share a screen in other systems, they put a nice little box around the edge of the screen, and I don't have that today. So a minor gripe, but there you are. What we're looking at here is the entry, the home page, if you like, for the card sorting application. This will show you a list of all of the card sort sessions that you have, and there are 4 of those at the moment. And each of these sessions is equivalent to a physical card sort that you've created at some point in the past. Today, the scenario we're working on is that of a retail insurance company that wants to create a taxonomy and has collected together a group of subject matter experts who are going to be providing the inputs for creating this taxonomy. And that is a session which is called Retail Insurance. So if I click on that,
Ian,
a few of us can't see. You only see your desktop.
Okay, let me just pause and see if I can change that. Apologies. Let me see. I want to share that. Do you know what? I didn't click the share button, I think. Has that done it now?
I can see it now, thanks. Yeah, cards. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. So you probably missed the first blurb where I had. So I'll just go back and show you the session list again. This is a list of current sessions, and it shows you the phase of that session. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But we're going to go into the retail insurance session, and you can see here. Let me just give you some orientation. The grey area is a workspace into which any participant can create cards, and a card represents a concept that will be created in the taxonomy. The workspace is capable of being panned and zoomed so that you can cope with larger taxonomies. You can see I'm panning around the screen here. If you take stuff off screen, then you get little arrows down the left-hand side here that show you that there's more to be seen off screen. But you can also see that by zooming out. So you can zoom out so that the workspace can accommodate as many cards as you want. Now, this is a card sort session that's in progress. Given the limitations on time, I couldn't really do one from scratch. So I put these together this afternoon. You can see that the cards are have different colored banners on the side, and those represent the people who've created them. And that list of people you can see down at the bottom left-hand side. So we've got users, Ian Piper, that's me. We've also got Peter Winsey, Harriet Vane, Charles Parker, and Mervyn Bunter. They're fictional people, but maybe some of you will know how fictional they are or where they're from. Each person has created a card by using this little form at the top here. So if I wanted to create some other type of insurance, like, for example, I don't know, pedal cycle, or some other concept that has to do with insurance. So when I click the add button, that card will appear in the workspace. But it doesn't just appear in my workspace, it appears in the workspace of anybody else who's logged in, wherever they are. And you'll also notice that when you hover over a card, it shows the name of the person who's created it, which is kind of supplementary evidence alongside the stripe down the side of the card. So what we've got here then is a workspace where there could be dozens of people who are participating, and each of them comes up with ideas about what cards should go on the table, precisely the same as in a real world card sort. There are some slight differences. In a real world card sort, you might typically have a bit of discussion about the value of a particular card, whether it should be in or out. Card sorting accommodates that in two ways. First of all, anyone can upvote or downvote a card. So if I take this policy exclusions card, for example, here, I can upvote that. I can only upvote something once. You can't cheat. And you'll notice that, you may have noticed that as I click the upvote button, it got slightly bigger. So the more upvote clicks a card gets, the bigger it gets in the user interface. We can also provide the next best thing to discussion, which is to add a note. Oops, not a note. And that will be stored. You'll see now, if you can see this, that if I zoom in a little bit, you'll probably be able to see it better, that we now have one note attached to this card and one upvote. So this is all a way in which you can work together to add information about the value of a card and to discuss its merits. If you've added a card, then you can delete it. If you're an administrator, you can delete any card. If you're an ordinary user, you can only delete the cards that you've added. Also, if you're an administrator, you can approve a card. Now, approving involves just ticking a particular card. We can see unemployment insurance gets a lot of votes. It's got 2 votes, actually, and I can tick that. And when I tick it, you'll see that the appearance of the card changes slightly. It's no longer possible to delete it, and you can't do anything much else with it, but it's approved. And similarly, I can go and approve some other cards. Let me just try a few of these. Actually, before I do, I'll show you one other feature, which is you can move any card around on the screen, and as you move them around, anybody else in the session can see them move. But you can also kind of visually group them. And if I wanted, say, there's a set of cards here that look like they might be sort of general purpose topics. So I can go into selection mode here, and then I can select a group of cards, and I can move them all around in one go, which is quite nice because it was a pain moving cards around individually, but this is a fairly recent feature that's been added. So if I just approve a few of these now, you'll see what we can do with them. That one, let's see, here. We'll leave it at that. Now, something else has happened when I created these, when I approved these cards. When you hover over a card, you can see who's created it, but something else has happened as well, which is that the card has moved into another workspace, which we're calling the structure phase. And this workspace is where we take the cards that have been approved and we put them into Pool Party. Let's go and have a quick look at that. If I move over to the structure phase now, you'll see that some of the cards, and actually only the cards that have been approved, have appeared in this workspace, as well as still being in the old workspace. I can move back and forth between the brainstorming and structure phases as often as I want, which means that you can do iterative development of a taxonomy like this. You'll notice we've got the filtered users. Sorry, I didn't show you that. If you've got a very busy workspace, let's just go back to brainstorming. If you've got a very busy workspace and you want to simplify it a little, you can select a particular user, and card sorting will then dim down the cards for everybody apart from that user, so that you can then see just their contributions. This same filtering is also available in structure phase. On the whole, at any given time, you've probably got far fewer cards in the structure phase than the early one. The other difference you'll notice between this and the brainstorming phase is that we've now got a taxonomy view as well. And this is actually a view of a Pool Party taxonomy. This has been read out of Pool Party in real time. And in fact, I've got the Pool Party screen behind this, which you may be able to see. So these same concepts that are being presented in here are already in Pool Party. So how do I add to them? Well, let's just take one or two of these. Let's take, we've got a concept scheme here called insurance industry roles. Suppose we want to put in a couple of concepts underneath that. We can put in broker. And to do that, we just drag it over, and when it highlights, we drop it. And similarly for actuary, let's drop it over here. And the action of doing that has caused this to appear within Pool Party. Now, that's a slight lie, because if I flip over to the Pool Party screen, you can't actually see them at the moment, and that's because of a refresh bug in Pool Party. They're working on fixing that. But if I click on insurance industry roles, also I've been timed out. So I'll just go back in again, apologies. If I open up retail insurance as a Pool Party project, you'll see now that we've got two insurance industry roles, actuary and broker. So the concept that I created in the brainstorming phase and that I dragged into this tree in the structure phase has also been created as a concept in Pool Party. And the net effect of that is that you can create taxonomies in Pool Party without having to learn the quite complex user interface and rules of how Pool Party works. You can do it in a fairly straightforward, easy to use piece of software. You'll notice that having dragged these into the Pool Party structure, they've disappeared from the structure phase, but they've also disappeared from the brainstorming phase. We had actuary and broker in this screen, but we don't have them anymore because they've been approved. They no longer exist within the context of the card sorting application. They've got a new life in Pool Party. Well, there's probably a lot more that I could talk about here, but I'm going to leave it at that. And I think that is probably about my 15 minutes, oh, and a little bit more, sorry. And so with that, I will close and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ian. That was really interesting. There's already some really positive comments about it, about how cool it is, for one. Okay, so we'll go straight on to Phil Stacey, who is Information Management at ICIOB. I think I've got that right, Phil. And
yeah.
to talk to us about Graphcommons.
Thank you. Good evening. What I think I'll do is I'll just share my screen here and where'd my right. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes and talk about a tool I've been using for I think over 5 years now, and it's quite a simple tool, and you can do a lot with it, but it's focused around graphs and sharing and collaborating with others. And I'll just talk about some of the features. So obviously you can model your data and visualize it, import CSVs, we'll look at that. There's quite a bit on the graph layout. You can search, collaborate, filter, and analyze your data. Also, it supports export to CSV, JSON, and some other formats. And one thing that's not listed here is that you can share it as a number of different formats. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play this very quick demo and talk you through some of the features of the system. So first we'll look at how you export data. And the reason I put this in first is I just wanted to kind of highlight how easy it is to move data from one graph to another. So you export it as a CSV, then you import those, and it also supports Google Sheets. And then you do some mapping. So you take individual properties and you map them to types. And you can kind of work through that as you're building these complex graphs. The next step is to save the graph. And there's quite a few videos that have been done by quite a number of people. There's some very interesting graphs that have been produced in the last couple of years. They're focused around political networks, and some art has been done. So in this particular sequence, we'll look at how you can filter a big graph. So that graph that we were just looking at was over 500 nodes and edges. And it has some very nice features as far as trying to visualize your data. And this particular one is about construction, because I'm in the construction industry. So you can just highlight over a node and you can kind of see where it's linked. And on the left there, it talks about the different properties that are connected to it. Next, we'll look at how you can search. And when I first started using this software, you could only search in your graph. But over the years, they let you search in everybody's graph that's on Graphcommons. And one thing I didn't mention is this is a free-to-use tool. So you can have work in progress or drafts or published graphs, but you can't have private for free. You have to pay, I think there's a minimum cost of $9 per month or what have you. But what I'm highlighting here is some of the connections as you're maybe starting to do a repair after you've handed over a building. And then you can just search to a certain particular area, and you can start looking at how these nodes are connected in a very simple manner. And the one thing I do like about this system is you can use Excel to kind of organize your data and bring it in one shot, and then just start to make these connections really quickly. So that was the demonstration. So the reason I use Graphcommons to do kind of brainstorming is when I look at data, for example, type, name, description, image, and reference in a spreadsheet, it's not very exciting to me. So, and on the bottom here is an export of the edges, which connect the nodes together, and you can either have them directional or bidirectional. And so you can kind of show a path. And I do like the filtering in the advanced layout. In that demonstration, I just kind of showed it really, really quickly, but there is many hours you can use in scaling it. You can make the nodes bigger. You can do lots of different things. Behind this, this button here is quite a few complex algorithms of giving it gravity, bringing it together. And you can also, over here, you can kind of see that some of the different filters. For example, you can filter it by a stage. In this particular one, it was about construction, and I used the Reba plan of works, and you could filter it by a stage of a progress of a project. Or you could filter it by the person that you want to look at their connections. When I was doing the demonstration, I only showed you a very small bit of the graph, which was a sequential flow. And I used that as a very simple way to connect all these nodes together. And so this is a graph that I've been working on lately, and it's to do with my ePrints project. And the reason I bring this up is this is kind of my brainstorming of how data is connected. So over here, we've got BibTeX. So organizing how it's created and how it is linked together. So it's part of a series, it has a URI, has an organization, it's a resource, a multi-book volume, and it's a Bibbo book. And over here are all the properties that are associated with ePrints. So page range, last modified date, abstract, type, reference tech, ISBN, title, pages, and so forth and so on. So I use it a lot for kind of brainstorming. And also when you get into lots of complex connections, I like to use the graph because you can make these connections really quickly and you can take them out really quickly. You can import data into one graph and strip it out. I didn't show you the bit where you can kind of take basically inside Graphcommons, take out a ton of nodes and strip out the graph, or grab a section of the graph and clean it up. But it's a really nice tool and a fast tool to use if you've got a complex system that you're looking at. For example, when I was working on BuildVoc, I used Graphcommons initially to understand the hierarchy, and you might want to give it a try. And that is it for me.
Thank you, Phil. That looks really interesting. I've not come across Graphcommons before, so from my point of view, that was really interesting to see. I'm up next. I'm just going to have to figure out how to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Right. So I'm so used to using Teams that I get completely bamboozled every time I try and use something else. So please let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah, okay. Can you see me? Okay. For some reason, oh, I know why. Obviously, everybody else is so much more professional at doing this than me. What I'm trying to do is show you the full presentation bit. So I can click out, try and get the right one again. Yay! So there we go. I'm Nikki Brown. I'm a enrichment specialist at John Wiley & Sons, and I've been there for a couple of years now. Previously, I worked, amongst other roles, as a content architect and thesaurus manager for Wolters Kluwer UK. So what I wanted to talk to you about, if I can get this screen to move, there we go, was a tool that I've discovered just very recently when I moved to Wiley. The thesaurus management, an ontology management system that they use is Cogito Studio Express. So there are many similarities with Pool Party, which I actually used before. But the particular function of this that I wanted to share with you, because I just think it's really cool, and it was something that I've only learned about recently, something called suggestions. So when you're building a taxonomy or a thesaurus, you need to add, you want to add synonyms, you want to add alternative labels, and maybe even hidden labels that are just common misspellings, but to have to do that by hand can be very laborious, especially the bigger your taxonomy is. And what Studio Express does, uses in the suggestions feature, is it actually comes with what they call skill cottages, which are already installed. One's RTF, which is a relevant term finder, and that's used to suggest new terms based on a project's corpus, so you can load up a body of documents into Studio Express. And then you can add those suggestions as new concepts or alternative labels. And then, but the other one is Wikipedia synonyms, and that's used to suggest synonyms. So that's the one I'm going to show you in a minute. The other one that I would like to probably do, maybe not, I can't demo it today, but because it's something that I think I'm going to be exploring over the next few weeks, but maybe in a future meetup. It's something they call similarity, which intrigues me because it creates what they call a document fingerprint by searching within the document for terms which are representative of that document. And that can be then used for content recommendation in the corpus, or if you then load up new documents, it can basically it's recommending that this content matches the fingerprint of the content you already have. So maybe you want to use the same thesaurus terms for classification. You can also use it to boost relevant topics within the document, which if you've got very long articles would be quite a useful feature, and create kill lists of stop terms. But the one I am going to show you now, hopefully if everything works, is suggestions. So hopefully this will work. Technology won't let me down. So just logging into. So it takes a couple of seconds just to load up. And so the way it works is if I'm going to have a look at, this is Techniques thesaurus for
Nikki, we can only see your presentation.
Oh, dread. Can you see the screen now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I told you I wasn't very good at using Zoom for this sort of thing. So yes, this is a thesaurus that we're in the middle of developing at the moment. So it's quite a big thesaurus, and it's got a certain number of synonyms, alternative terms added. And we've loaded up some documents into it, so we can actually look for what terms are being extracted from each document that are in the thesaurus, and where are they within the document, which is quite useful. And then you can actually, just click on a little hat and go to the term. So it gives you all the usual information about what that term is. It's broader, narrow terms, etc., etc. And it can also show you by clicking on this, exactly where that particular, so this is centrifugation, is occurring, and it shows you that it's stemming version of it. But the feature, which is, as I say, pretty cool, is this suggestion of synonyms, which gives you a number of different variations. So we've already got centrifuge as an alternative label. And if that appears in it, you can see that it's actually grayed out. So you know exactly which ones have already been used. But then you've got different terms that it's suggesting as either alternative terms. And also, because this is multilingual, you get it in French and sometimes in German. But the feature is, and knowing my luck with this won't show on the screen, but you can also, because it draws in the information from Wikipedia, you get this handy little link there to go directly to the Wikipedia page, which is quite, has been, from my point of view, as a non-expert at times, it's just really handy to help me to confirm whether or not I want to use a particular drag one of these in, because that's what all you do is basically, I want to drag that in, I'm going to keep it as a hidden label. And what that actually does is what you're doing is you're building up a richness around your preferred label within the thesaurus, so that when you come to do your content classification, if that's what you're doing, then you don't have to you're not building up loads of extra terms. You're building up the actual term and trying to capture things that people might use normally or in their search terms. The other one I was going to quickly show you, which I can play around with a little bit more, is one that is very much in its infancy of, there we go, of creation. So this is a much simpler taxonomy. And you can see some of these terms are pretty broad. So we've got philosophy there. And I've loaded up some documents as well. So, but if I look at this as well, so it's come up with a whole stream. Obviously, I probably wouldn't use all of these, but it's got a whole, string of different possible synonyms. But also, it's showing me how this can possibly be ambiguous. You can see that depending on the context of your thesaurus. But there's apparently a song called Ben Folds 5 Songs. So, you've got these different possibilities of synonyms that you might want to add. There was another one, ethics, I think it was. So I'll just find that term. So this one was quite interesting because, again, this is a very broad term, and this is what I'm going to be talking to the subject matter experts in about 2 or 3 days, is how they can actually build up, if it's relevant to their content, how they can actually build this up by just pulling in different terms which have been suggested by this feature within Studio Express. So they can build up their hidden labels, they can build up their alternative terms. They might even want to use it to add new narrow terms to their broader term. And that means that they could then end up, for instance, having the narrower terms added in here, and then just say to the engine, well, ethics is obviously too broad a term to be useful, so we'll just say don't extract that, but we have all of these much richer, narrower terms. So obviously this is part of an application, which is a paid-for application, but I just wanted to show, I really wanted to just show how it's actually using linked data and Wikipedia to start to help you as a user build up and expand your thesaurus or your taxonomy. So that was my presentation, and I will now hand over to David Haynes, who is going to talk about Nvivo.
Okay, thank you very much, Nikki. I think you're doing a wonderful job chairing the session and also doing a presentation. I'm just going to share my screen now and bring up my presentation. Okay, just bear with me. Can you see that presentation? Can somebody just?
Yes.
That's great, thank you, good. Okay, I'm David Haynes. I'm a lecturer at Edinburgh Napier University, and I'm also involved with ISCO UK, for those of you who've not met me before. What I wanted to do is just share some of my experience of using a tool which is widely used in the academic environment, Nvivo 12, and it was primarily designed to help people analyze interviews and other research data. So it's very much focused on analyzing text and helping you to code it and categorize it. And it occurred to me that actually this is what we're all about in knowledge organization. How do you organize knowledge? How do you categorize it? How do you arrange it? How do you group it together? And latterly, I've been using it also to help me organize some of the literature that I've been working with. So what I've done is just put together a demonstration for the purposes of today, or rather some screenshots. I'm not going to try online access because it's kind of a bit ropey at the moment for me. So what I have is a corpus of data. I have gathered a number of references from the literature in the course of doing different pieces of research or investigations, and I keep them mostly in Mendeley. But I've downloaded them, the full text of those articles which I've got from the literature, into Nvivo 12, which is the tool that I'm using here at the university. Now, this is just a random collection, so I haven't selected them for any particular criterion, except that I've read them at some point in the last few years, and they've ended up in my kind of literature collection. But you could do this with any kind of textual data. So you could have a whole lot of interviews, or you could have stuff that you've downloaded from social media, or scraped from websites, any of those things, as long as you have a number of individual items that you want to compare and group together. And what I've done in Nvivo 2 is they've got this cluster analysis tool. So what it does is it looks for similarity between items within your corpus. So in this case, it's looking for the words that are in common between any two articles, and it creates a similarity score for those two articles, and then it groups those which are closest together in the resulting cluster. So there are a number of different algorithms that can be used for this, but what I will emphasize is that this is an automated process, so it's intended just to do a kind of mechanical check, if you like, of the similarity between items in a collection. You can compare on the basis of word similarity, which is what I've done, or your items may have pre-assigned codes. So you may have previously gone through and coded it, and you just want to see which ones have got most codes in common, or you could look for other attributes that those items have. You know, it might be things like when they were created or what format they were in or whatever. So you've got a degree of flexibility. So the first thing you do is you select the items that you want to compare. So I could just compare 2 items if I wanted to, but that would just give me a score. It wouldn't really be a very helpful tool for clustering. Here I've got about 50 or so articles. No, actually 36 articles, I think it was, that I'm comparing. So it's not a huge number. But it's a very useful feature because it does this relatively quickly, and you can have quite a large corpus of data that you're using to compare. And this just shows you some of the choices that you have. So I'm clustering by word similarity rather than by coding or by other attributes. And then it's also allowing me to choose which algorithm I want to use. Jacquard's is probably the simplest and most straightforward one, and that really shows the degree of similarity in terms of numbers of words that are shared between 2 articles. And it does that successively for all of the articles in the collection compared with each of the other ones, so that you get a coefficient score for each pair comparison. Sorensen's coefficient is very similar to that. It uses a similar kind of basis for that. And Pearson's correlation coefficient is a little bit more complex. So you get slightly different results depending on which one you use. So using Sorensen's coefficient and also saying that I want kind of 10 categories, what it's done is it's grouped them together, but it's also helpfully showed them in different colors so that I can see what a category is. So you can see that Guimarães has published 2 articles, and they're both very similar. Probably not surprising, because he's probably talking about, in fact, both in the same year as well. So he's probably talking about research which he has done on a particular subject. And you can see then in the next one that Guimarães, Albertson and Smiralia have got a group together, and I know that they all happen to work in a similar area in knowledge organization. So again, that's not surprising. There'll be a lot of words in common. And indeed, they may have quoted each other in their articles as well. So that would tend to increase the similarity between them. You may get some outliers. So Anne is a bit of an outlier there and is in a group on her own. So you can get an idea about how this works. And it's also very helpful because you've got this tree structure, so you can see how closely 2 items might be related to each other. This is the same set, but using the Pearson's correlation. And I've asked it also to number them, so you can see that group 1 is Riva, and then group 2 is Guimarães, and group 3 is Guterres, etc. So again, you've got an interesting collection there. And some groups, such as group 9, is actually quite large. So again, you've got a good sense of how things are dividing up. So I'm just demonstrating this really as a nice feature of something which was designed for something entirely different. So it's not in the same league as Pool Party or Cogito or any of the other things that we've seen, because they are designed specifically for organizing and creating taxonomies. This is designed for analyzing research data, but people have found that this is a useful feature. It's not a replacement for creating some kind of conceptual map. You still need to know what's in that literature, which would probably mean going to look at least the titles of each of the items in each group and to try and work out what it is that's similar about them, because all the software has done is do a mechanical process to see the number of words that correspond in both of the items, not about the meaning of them. And that's where the human element obviously has to come in. So it's not creating a coherent taxonomy or a typology, but it could be a really useful first step if you were looking at a large collection of data. And I found it very useful just in my own research. If I have a lot of references that I've read in connection with that, and I just want to make a little bit more sense of what I have and how I'm analyzing that literature. Obviously, with things like this, you can experiment with different settings to see what works best. So, you know, the first time you do it may not be the give you the best result initially. And it probably helps if you understand a little bit about the algorithm and how it's managed to cluster things together. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. And, you know, I hope that that might be useful, particularly if you're working in an academic environment. Okay, that's all I have to say. Over to you, Nikki.
Thank you. Right, I've found this evening and the different tools that you've been demonstrating really interesting. I think we're now we can go to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and let us hear. There were a couple of comments in the chat. There was one, I think this was about Graphcommons, saying for, it's worth confirming that unless you subscribe, I think you're publishing your work into an open graph space, useful for connections, and hence commons in the name, but you have to be comfortable with your data being out there. Phil, is that?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the whole purpose of Graphcommons is that you could search in other people's graphs and bring their information into yours. And initially, I think when I first started using it, you couldn't do that. So if there was a node or a topic or a subject or even a cluster of nodes that you wanted to bring into your graph, you can, but you're right, it is open. And if you do pay a small subscription, you can have private graphs. And I did have them when I did my, my research, my dissertation. So I kind of hid them back, but now I just left them as work in progress.
So that sounds to me like there would be possibly more value in having it in the open space than privately, because then you get to collaborate with other people, or, you know, if you're helping them, then they're helping you. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, and I think there's quite an open community on Graphcommons as far as comments. And if you get a chance to have a look, there's some very complex graphs that people have spent a lot of time producing, especially they've linked them with the API to Twitter for a certain account, or you can see just massive networks. And just being able to explore those in very small bits of data, I find very helpful, because you look at it and you think, just like if you looked at the linked data community, is huge. But then if you broke it down into small clusters, then you can, you know, maybe absorb some of the properties.
Cool. Damien asked, once you've applied the class enrichment, how is it used? But I'm not sure whether this what this actually applies to. Damien, are you still with us? Maybe given the time, it might have actually been concerning my own presentation, but right, okay. Sorry, thank you. As an additive process and bringing automation to bear, it's very useful for exploratory analysis of text. Thank you, when you were adding alternative labels. So that does refer to my own demonstration. It is an additive process, and it can, because the addition of the synonyms suggested alternative terms, as well as just capturing misspellings or different variations, which when I was working with the team that this thesaurus is for, they kind of overestimated what was captured in stemming, for instance. So they were basically thinking that, well, it's not capturing this variation of this term. And what they were actually doing was changing a noun into a verb, or a verb into an adjective. So obviously it's not going to stem in that case. But what this suggestions feature does, which, as I say, is it does actually pick up all of those, whether it's a noun, a verb, or an adjective. It's related to that, your preferred label. It has its limitations if you're, well, I say limitations, but if for instance, it can basically indicate to you whether or not, if your term is very technical, so, you know, at Wiley we deal a lot with medical, technical, very, very scientific terms, which are not generally, might not be generally recognized. So it won't come up with anything for that. It will also, if your thesaurus term, and I don't know about you guys, but I get this quite a lot with people, especially when they're first starting out in thesaurus construction, is their term will be maybe something like an article heading or something reminiscent, which will not work necessarily as a thesaurus term. So the suggestion engine doesn't come up with a synonym because it can't. So those are a couple of observations that I've noticed, and that's actually very good feedback to be able to A, give to the subject matter experts, and B, it starts to validate whether or not what you're adding in as a concept term is in actual fact a term. Okay, does anybody else have anything they would like to ask us? Please go ahead. And thanks for the comments about these sessions have been so inspiring. It's great to see multidisciplinary approaches. Thank you. Well, that's what we're trying to do with these ISCO UK meetups, is to just introduce, we're all from different backgrounds and different experiences in knowledge organization. So we're just trying to, as I say, bring new topics into the arena and hopefully spark something off in you guys that you might find useful when in your own work. David, that segues, I think, nicely into, you were going to say a couple of words about ISCO UK.
Okay, thank you, Nikki, and thank you very much for chairing that session. That was tremendous. Yeah, I'm now speaking my role as chair of ISCO UK, and I just really wanted to say a few words about what we're about. I do this every time, so please bear with me if you've heard this before. We have one or two interesting announcements at the end, so don't go away. I won't be long. ISCO UK is the UK chapter of the International Society for Knowledge Organization. And as part of that, we organize meetings, including this meetup. In earlier times, we used to have face-to-face meetings. We have an annual conference, a biannual conference. So next year, we're organizing a conference. So watch this space, visit our website, have a look and see what's coming up, because we will be shortly announcing a call for papers and also inviting interest in that. We publish articles through the journal Knowledge Organization. We have a an encyclopedia, the ISCO Encyclopedia of Knowledge Organization, which is available on the main ISCO website, and you can get to that through the ISCO UK website. We have a lot of resources which people can use as kind of a reference source. So if people, if you want background about a particular topic to do with knowledge organization, then there's stuff on the websites. One of the other important things that we do is that we provide research awards and conference awards. So every year we will sponsor a student to go to a conference, and we'll also provide an award to help a student do a piece of research in knowledge organization. And that can be a student at almost any level, from an undergraduate final year project through to a PhD who wants to do a specific piece of work that might need some additional support in order to do that. So again, if you visit our website, there'll be details about that. I'll now hand over to Arif, because he has further information and news for us. Oh, finally, before I go away, I just want to say thank you very much to all the speakers. That's been a really interesting session today. And I'd also like to thank Nikki and Arif and Phil, who've put together today's meeting. So over to you, Arif.
Hello, everybody. Apologies for the messages in the chat about that I'm not muted, but I was on mute for all the time. But anyway, the news is that our next meetup is on 27th of October, and we have Jennifer Parucci, senior taxonomist at New York Times. She will talk to us about metadata at New York Times 1851 to date. And our last one is on November 17th, that Panos Alexopoulos, head of ontology as Text Kernel in Amsterdam, and he's recently published a new book, and he was going to talk about myths and half-truths about semantic data modeling. Hope we will see you there, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Arif, and thanks to everybody for joining us, and thanks to the speakers, and have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.